Greetings and welcome to another episode of Two Ball Guys. My name is Dave Anderson. I'm a senior policy fellow at the Wisconsin Institute for Public Policy and Service, otherwise known as WIPS. Today's topic is the upcoming legislative agenda for the Wisconsin State Senate, featuring two of our Senate's legislative leaders.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And my name's Eric Giordano, and I'm the executive director of WIPS. WIPS is a unit of the University of Wisconsin system, founded in 2007. And here's where, Dave, we normally recite a brief mission statement about what WIPS does and is, but this morning I thought I'd take a little different tack and mention some of the work that we're doing through one of our organizational arms known as WIPS Research Partners. So WIPS Research Partners offers, and here I'm going to just read the statement here, sorry folks. WIPS Research Partners offers businesses, government, and nonprofits a full spectrum of academic technical resources of the University of Wisconsin system using proven research methods and human-centered problem solving tailored to client needs. So I thought I'd give a couple of examples of some of the work that we're up to. For example, we're working on a major statewide study sponsored by the Department of Health Services involving over 200 elementary, middle, and high school students to find out how they're coping with school during this really unusual pandemic environment. So students across Wisconsin in rural, urban, and suburban schools are participating. Another interesting project that we're up to is we're assisting the city of Wausau's policing task force to gather information from residents and visitors about their experiences and perceptions of policing in the community. And ultimately, that information will be used to make recommendations towards more community-informed policing. And then a final example is we received a major grant to work with multiple health systems, government, and community partners in central Wisconsin to provide health education and services to Hmong and Hispanic residents who have been particularly vulnerable really in this COVID environment and don't often have the same access to information and resources. And so this work includes providing flu vaccinations and education and other basic needs to vulnerable populations, among others. So thanks for bearing with me on that. And Dave, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and thanks for reviewing those exciting projects, Eric. I have to say that it's really rewarding to see some of the great research and other kinds of projects that WIPS Research Partners is all about. And I have to also emphasize that we are indeed busy at WIPS. And if our viewers want to learn more about WIPS Research Partners, they can connect with us by email at info@wips.org. Speaking of being busy, Eric, I wanted to let you know that I've been really busy lately researching only the funniest possible lines to use on today's show. So if you would indulge me for just a moment, I want to ask you, if pilgrims came to America on the Mayflower, Eric, how did barbers get here? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea, Dave.
They came on clipper ships.
Of course.
Only the best.
Well, I'm so glad that you've done your research. You might want to spend a little more time on the research. And you might also actually be surprised because I too have a little joke to share. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So what did the person with curly hair say when their comb got stuck? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. No. This is not good. That's not with a K, Dave. Get it?
Hey, what happened to that New Year's resolution you were talking about on the last show about telling funny jokes, Eric?
I'm living up to it, aren't I?
There you go. In the meantime here, let's check in with our incredible producer and marketing coordinator here at WIPS, Chill Hop DJ, and of course, a token representative of that attractive younger demographic, Luke Rudolph. Welcome, Luke. What's new with you?
Hey everyone, not a whole lot. I'm very excited for the Packer game this weekend, and in preparation, I've started to eat only green and gold food this week. But the only problem is I don't have any food dye, so I've just been using spray paint, and it's all right.
Yeah, there you go. I appreciate your generation, their sort of can-do spirit. Way to go. Let us know if you get ill.
I will.
All right. Well, thanks for all you do, Luke. And Dave, it's time to get right to our today's special topic, which is Wisconsin 2021-2022 legislative agenda. And we have two really outstanding guests. And we want to remind viewers that if you have questions for our guests during the show, please feel free to post them in the Facebook chat section.
It really does give me a great pleasure, Eric, to introduce our two guests today. First of all, State Senator and Majority Leader Devin LeMahieu, Republican from Oostberg, Wisconsin, and State Senator and Minority Leader Janet Bewley, a Democrat from Mason, Wisconsin. Welcome, Senators. It's really good to see you. I've had the pleasure of working with both of these leaders when I worked in Madison myself for the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development and a few other places along the way. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I think you've set the bar for humor a little too high. You know, I'm not going to be able to get above that, but Devin and I are going to try.
We get that all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna jump right in with I think one of the questions that's really top of mind for most Wisconsinites these days, and that of course relates to COVID-19. And so to kick things off today, what's the status of the pending COVID-19 legislation? I think that's been getting quite a bit of coverage across the state, but where do things stand as of today? And Senator LeMahieu, maybe you can go first, and Senator Bewley next.
Well, good afternoon. Great to be on the show. I'm excited for this show and to answer some questions and to converse with Minority Leader Bewley. This will be a great opportunity. But so a little background. So back in November and December, Speaker Voss and I were meeting, having phone calls with Governor Evers, trying to make sure we had a COVID bill ready to go. And as soon as the federal government passed their extension of federal relief in the middle of December, unfortunately, the governor stopped negotiating with us and put out his so-called compromise bill. So the speaker and I continued to work on what we thought would be a bill that hopefully the governor would sign. And unfortunately, the first week of the session, the speaker and I went down different paths. So we reached out to the governor's office to see if there was a way we could get a bill done. And so we took the assembly bill, put an amendment on it, and it was great that, you know, when we debated it and passed it through the Senate, that it was a 29-2 vote. It was great that Senator Bewley and most of her colleagues voted with us. We feel the need to get this bill done, and while putting important protections, liability protections for businesses, churches, small employers, nonprofits, to make sure that they can operate in this COVID world. A lot of the other provisions were extensions from what we did last April, and just important things. So hospitals, so, you know, the state government can respond to the pandemic going forward. So the bill is back in the Assembly's hands. I've had conversations with the Speaker's office, and hopefully we can come to an agreement and get that taken care of.
Great.
I appreciate the majority leader's analysis. It's about 75% of what I'd say, but the 25% we don't need to talk about, but it's pretty darn close. One of the things that I observe is that when the time came that we really, really needed that communication between the Senate and the governor's office, it was there. The governor stepped up, and really, it is, I think, a very clear demonstration of how we mean it when we say we want to get things done. And the interesting thing is that we came up with a bill. Well, I only had a very minimal part in it. I was on the sidelines kind of kibitzing and, you know, and throwing in a few flags when I wanted to call a foul. But for the most part, we knew what was going on the floor. And I think that is a lot to do with the fact that Devin and I do talk. We really, really do. We may disagree on policy issues and how we vote, but with the mechanics of getting work done and communicating honestly and clearly with each other, we're so far so good. So far so good. I think that it's interesting that as the majority leader said, the bill is now will have to be picked up again by the Assembly and passed in its current form. but we're seeing things happening in committee that look like some of the pieces that were taken out that would prevent the assembly from passing that bill the way they wanted it are going to be passed as standalones. Now, here we go. The majority leader has the key to that question because he knows what's going to be on the agenda on Tuesday when we go to the floor. So we're going to take up some bills, and it'll be interesting to see what they are, because I think we're getting closer and closer every day to passing a COVID bill that makes sense for the people of Wisconsin.
You know, a follow-up to that question, actually, we did get a viewer question prior to the start of today's show. And our viewer is wondering, and I'm kind of reading it here, what actions will be taken to make sure all citizens of Wisconsin will have the chance to get the COVID vaccination in a timely manner? And what does that timeline look like? And again, I think that's a question that's really top of mind for a lot of people across the state. So
I'd say that is foremost in the minds of every person in the country. You know, we had a lot of effort that was put into Warp Speed to get the product, to get the vaccines. And now we have 28 different manufacturers at some level of approval in the process. What came short in that particular plan of Warp Speed was supply chain management. And that was left to, well, you know, we're going to get products, plural, in many forms and many kinds of shipments to the states, not really clear when, and then the states have to disperse them. And that's not just a matter of lining people up. I mean, a lot of us who are my age remember getting the polio. I don't know if it was a vaccine it was on. I remember it being on a sugar cube, but we just lined up at the schoolyard and everybody took one. We can't do that anymore. We have record keeping. We have to make appointments. We're in a time of COVID where we can't bring a lot of people to one place. It's got to be one by one. And that is immense. That's immense. And I think that every county is doing what they can to get everything that that particular county needs based upon when they get a shipment, where it should go, who's prioritized, how do you let them know, do they have to make an appointment or can they come? Will you get people and then they'll be in line? It's an enormous undertaking.
Yeah, so obviously this is the top of people's minds, getting that vaccine out there, getting the most vulnerable vaccinated as quick as possible. Unfortunately, Janet and I have very little to do with the rollout. It's being done by DHS under the leadership of our governor. You know, Wisconsin didn't get off to a good start. We're currently 12th out of 12th in Midwestern states. We do have a new health secretary. And by the way, I've been hearing frustrations from, you know, hospitals and public health about sort of the start to the vaccine rollout. We now have a new interim DHS health secretary, and it seems like they're making progress right away. So hopefully that continues. As of Monday, people age 65 and older can start getting the vaccine. So that's great that that's finally happening. And there's other groups that are eligible now. I don't remember off the top of my head, transit workers, food service, things like that. So hopefully this process speeds up and we can start our way towards getting vaccinations for the entire state.
I think that you may see a little bit of volleying back and forth between the majority leader and I about, you know, who's to blame, back and forth. You know, I think that what we need to do is tell the people of Wisconsin that everyone is doing everything they can, and it's not just DHS that has to do it. It's a lot of understaffed county health departments that are being burdened with this at a time when county budgets are threadbare. The other thing is that we can say that people 65 and older can get the vaccine, but that only means they're eligible in that particular round. It doesn't mean that you get to get it tomorrow. It means you are now in the category that's eligible to receive it. And it is, the hard part is figuring out where you go, How do you have to sign up? Should you be looking for a site? What do you do? And so, primary care physicians are a good place to go. The county health department is a good place to go. The ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Center, if you're a senior, is a fabulous place to go for information. But the hard part is putting all those things together and getting the good news to someone that not only are you eligible, here's how you get one. That's the hard part.
We appreciate your perspectives, and yeah, I mean, I had a feeling you were both going to say this really isn't first and foremost in the court of the legislature. So thanks for helping us understand that. Let's step back for a minute. Here we are starting out with a new legislative session. Congratulations, Senator LeMahieu, on your majority leader status. And we're kind of curious, what expectations do each of you have for this session of the legislature? Like, what do you see kind of happening, and what is it that you're anticipating?
Well, make sure you congratulate Senator Bewley as well, because she's fairly new as the minority leader. So we're both sort of, I mean, she had a little more time than me, but we still may be a little wet behind the ears in our new roles. But obviously the most important thing we do every session is pass a budget. So that's on February 16, I believe, the governor is going to give his State of the Budget address and introduce his budget, which then works through the legislature. Last session, I had the privilege of serving on the Finance Committee, so I got to see that process up close. Last session, the governor signed our budget, which was great. We had a budget that was signed into law. There were some line item vetoes, which we expected, but it was great that the governor actually signed the budget that we sent to him, even though we made some substantial changes from his initial budget. This go around is going to be a little different with that, because we had a pandemic, unemployment spiked, our revenue isn't going to be as favorable as maybe it was going into our last budget, or what we'd hoped if there wouldn't have been a pandemic. So it's going to be a tougher challenge, because money's going to be tight. But that's obviously the most important thing that we do every session. I think our last budget was $84 billion for 2 years. So obviously it's a huge piece of legislation and sets priorities for the next 2 years. So that's one of the most important things that we do. Probably one other focus that we'll be looking at, which is a great piece of where both Janet and I both know is very important, is broadband expansion. We made a nice step in the last budget, but in my meetings so far this session, almost any group that we meet with that has nothing to do with telecommunications, that's one of their number one issues. Whether it's the realtors because they want to sell houses where there's broadband access, or farmers for agriculture, things like that. So I think that's an important thing that it's almost become like a utility, making sure that broadband is there. And it was sort of highlighted during the pandemic because more people were working virtually, trying to make sure they can go on a Zoom meeting like this, have the internet speed to do that. So, I think that will be one thing for sure that we can all agree on, and keep moving the state forward to continue to connect that last mile.
Great, thank you.
Let me start with the question, and then I'd like to follow on some of the things Devin said. The priorities of my caucus of the Democrats is always working families and the places where they work. Working families and the businesses that keep them going, the businesses that they may own, the problems of their children, their healthcare. It's working families, and through that lens, we look at COVID, and we want to get something done with COVID right away, and we're working on that. We're really that's like that's the most immediate thing that we're working on. The budget is the main thing, because anything that happens is, of course, it's about money and who's going to get it. And policy is often put in there, but for the most part, we try to keep it as straightforward about money as we possibly can. This is now going to be my 11, 12, 13, 14, sixth budget. I haven't worked on them, specifically, but I've lived through them. I think Devin's probably about the same. It lived through them. You know, you survive them is really what you do. You get to keep your hair. You don't lose your hair, but you do have to suffer through them. The budget is a very, very dynamic document. And right now, one of the hardest things is that the limited ability for the public input. It used to be that people could just testify. They come in, they testify, they line up in the hallways, and they can't do that now. So even if you go out and have listening sessions, the ability of the public to weigh in is hard. One thing that we don't have is the ability for people to testify via Zoom. We don't have that interactive capacity yet for large groups of people to participate in that kind of a thing. I mean, imagine an auditorium and people moving in and out. You know, it's monumental. I'm not sure what we're going to do, but I am concerned about it. And then the other thing I want to mention and follow up to Devin is broadband. Can you imagine if you were in a rural area and you didn't have broadband? How are you going to find out where you go for your COVID test, where you go for a vaccine? You don't have a newspaper. You can maybe listen to the radio. Television is so far away, and you might not even be in the media market where you'd get local news about your town or county. How are you going to know? You can't even Google. You have no access, pretty much no access to information. And we need to fix that, because not only are they not getting the immediate information and access that they need, they can't work from home, their kids can't go to school remotely, but it's that other piece, that piece that people don't talk about. You are denied access to what everybody else has at just a click. At a click, they can find something out. You get a definition of a word. You can't do that. You got to go to a dictionary. Can you imagine? You are in a third world in terms of communication, and we have to change that. And I think that one of the things that, and I know I'm going on long, but one of the things we have to kind of change is that we're almost at the point where money might not be the only thing that's going to fix this. A lot of the areas have made use of broadband expansion grants, and the land that's left is the land where companies can't make money. Now, we can give them money to put the infrastructure in, but they don't want the customers. Those customers aren't going to make any money. They're too far apart. They don't buy the expensive things. And so they're saying, you can't pay me to go there. I don't want to go there. So we don't have those providers on the periphery of these open, barren areas who want to go in. They don't want to apply for the grants because they don't want those customers. So we have to fix that, and it's going to take a lot of work.
Well, one positive is you both clearly are passionate about this broadband issue, and it seems like both parties are. So this kind of leads into the next question, which is, what hope is there for some bipartisan legislation? And let's ask specifically about broadband. Do you see a pathway towards some healthy bipartisan legislation here? Majority Leader, what do you think?
No, I definitely hope, especially in the broadband area, since it usually has a fairly high price tag on it. It was done through the budget last time. We may have to do some tweaking because, as Senator Bewley mentioned, the last time the PSC had a round of grants, a lot of these grants were for speeding up service in already served areas rather than doing that connection to the last mile. So we might have to change, how these grants are awarded to make sure that it's hitting those who are not served rather than those who maybe don't have the brightest and speediest connection with these grants. So, that's one area we can look at. But, obviously, we need a governor to sign our legislation. So that makes it bipartisan right away. Last session, all the legislation that I worked, vast majority of the legislation I worked on, I was trying to get Democrats to co-sponsor my bill, trying to get it so that it would pass with Democrat votes in committees. And, obviously the media focuses sometimes or often on the things that we don't agree on, because that's more interesting than the things that we do agree on. We do get a lot of legislation. We had a lot of bills passed last session. Unfortunately, because of COVID, there was a good 40 or 50 out there that had passed the Assembly with bipartisan support that we didn't get through the Senate. So hopefully we can get some of those bills done early in this session that have already been vetted through the process. And obviously there's going to be times where we don't agree, and we pass things because we think it's important. But when there's a way to work together, we definitely need to do that.
I would agree. I think that I think Devin is being kind to his predecessor when he says we couldn't go back, we couldn't pass these bills because of COVID. We didn't pass the bills because the majority leader didn't want to go to the floor. I mean, we could have gone to the floor. And we could have figured out a way to do it, but it unfortunately didn't happen. I mean, because we've done it. We went to the floor in COVID last week. So we can do it. We definitely can do it. It's going to involve some unlikely partners. It's going to involve groups that are going to be willing to have a conversation about giving power through some sort of a utility authority, or a group that can form a consortium, or in some way coming up with ways to have towns or units of government, cities or tribes or something, actually have the authority to be able to say, we're going to own this company, and this is how we're going to handle it, and this is how we're going to have payment for services. Some of those times we've got to tweak some laws that people don't want to tweak, because people like their markets. Think of craft beer. It's a niche market, but big breweries have to watch it. They got to make sure that those craft beers don't get too uppity. And in some ways, we've got a lot of other industry participants who are, for their book of business and for the fact that they've got shareholders, they have to watch what's going on in other segments. And when people start saying, I'm going to be an internet provider, they get, well, not everybody can be an internet provider. So there's some subtleties to this, but I think we can get there as long as people realize that the outcome is making sure that all Wisconsinites can participate in our society and in our economy. They need to be full participants, and that's the goal.
Eric, I'm gonna kind of mix up our order of questions here, because I think this question is really kind of appropriate to what we're talking about. And this might be a little bit of inside baseball, but I think a number of our viewers wonder about the dynamics of your caucuses in relation to the state assembly. Is there a lot of discussion between the houses on legislative priorities, or does each house come up with its own legislative priorities on its own and then can decide what to work on together? I mean, how does that whole process work? I'm just kind of curious. I think some of our viewers are curious about that as well.
So I personally have a great working relationship with all three of my representatives. Two of them came in the same time as me. I knew one of them lives 2 blocks away from me, so we've known each other a while. To get a piece of legislation signed into law, it needs to pass both houses. And so you need to, whether you want to or not, but I think it's great to work with, assembly colleagues to get them involved if you're working on an initiative or a piece of legislation, to make sure that there's buy-in from both houses. Historically, we've had great working relationships between both houses. Hopefully we do going forward. And, that's really important to the legislative process.
One of the things, and this is sort of, inside baseball a little bit, but if you just look at the number of people that are in the assembly versus the number of people that are in the Senate, and the fact that the assembly has 99 and the Senate only has 33, that makes the caucuses smaller and manageable. It's more about relationships of personalities first. It's about who, and then those personalities determine how you talk about the issues, or how far, how I don't want to say left or right, but how seriously you want to take one issue, or another might want to just take a real slow approach. And once you go into the assembly, whoa, it's a lot of people. So there's a lot more variety of opinions and a lot more people wanting to claim that flag. They've got a flag and they want to wave it because they have constituents that are back in their districts who might have different needs than another. So I understand that the assembly they've got their own way of doing things, and we need to be able to be responsive to what those leaders are able to commit to, because they could be eaten alive by their own caucus. So it is, you've got to please a lot of people in our roles, and our caucuses also have to understand that they are part of a larger group, and that we are all for the common good. What's the best decision, not just for one area, but for the state? Those are very hard things to balance as an individual legislator, and then becomes amplified when you have a large caucus. But it's all about communication and establishing trust and building on the fact that I may disagree with you, but I know you're going to tell the truth. I can't tell you how much truth telling is of value. If you just know that someone that you disagree with is telling you the truth, you can go so much further. And it's a wonderful value in many of the legislators that I work with.
And there's a lot of interesting dichotomies in this. There's the Assembly and Senate, which have their differences, the Republicans and Democrats. But then there's also the regional differences around the state. Senator Bewley's district is a lot different than my district, which is even a lot different than Senator Koinga's district or Senator Johnson's district. It takes me an hour and 15 minutes to drive from one side of my district to another. Some people can walk their Senate district almost in the more urban areas. And in Senator Bewley's district, it might be like a half-day drive. I don't know. Your district's really big, so.
Well, in some places I can't get there from here, I can't. I have to go.
Yeah. So.
Great. Dave, I'm hoping, well, since we skipped the order a little bit, I want to get back to one of our viewer questions that we received before the show, actually. And, let's face it, we've been through some national trauma around the election. So some viewers want to know about Wisconsin and what Wisconsin might or might not do, and what, that the parties might want to do. So the question goes like this. There are definitely strong opinions, but regardless, do you anticipate legislation this biennium around the issue of election reform in Wisconsin? And if so, what do you think that legislation would address specifically?
Sure. Some of my colleagues are already working on different ideas of how to reform elections, election integrity, things like that. So two things are incredibly important in elections. First, that they're fair, free of fraud, where people who are eligible to vote actually can vote, but that there's no people voting who shouldn't be voting, things like that. But the second most important, as far as I'm concerned, is the perception that it is a fair election. And when there's a close election, we have a lot of these in Wisconsin. They go both ways. Close elections, it's when there's irregularities or things like that, it breeds mistrust in the process. So I think the most important thing we can do, which I know we can hopefully all get together on, is starting to count those absentee ballots before Election Day, because even before COVID, people were starting to vote more by absentee ballot, and this was exacerbated this last year because people wanted to vote remotely or come vote in-person absentee to avoid the crowds, things like that. So just the city of Milwaukee cannot process hundreds of thousands of votes on one day, which is why we have the 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. ballot dump, because that's when they get done counting their votes. Well, that, if people don't understand what's going on in the process, that breeds mistrust. And so something like that we can hopefully get done early on, so that way we don't have these challenges going forward. But there's other things. I think a lot of my colleagues and I believe that the Elections Commission staff may have taken some liberties with how Wisconsin law is written and went above and beyond that law. But so we may be putting some legislation out there to clarify what the role of the Elections Commission is, and to make sure that Wisconsin election law is clear.
Okay, thanks. Senator Bewley, any thoughts on that?
Well, it's complicated. I mean, the thing about election reform is that there's quite a few different things going on there. In a lot of cases, people are talking about, graduated voting. What is that called? There's a name for that, where you rank voting. Is that what it's called? And then the people want to get rid of the electoral college, and then other people want to talk about the actual methods of voting. So I think whatever we might choose to do, we've got to make sure that we're dealing with a solution that the people understand and want. For example, I think if we went straight to something about the electoral college, which would be on the federal level, I'm just using that as an example, we're not ready, because most of the people don't remember that lesson from civics class on what the electoral college is and how it functions. So the same thing would come if we were to change how we vote in our state and what we do. It would require a lot of careful evaluation of what people really mean when they say we need our election laws to change. Okay, what exactly is the part of it that you don't trust? Like Devin said, the most important thing is that people have access to voting, they can vote, and they'll know that their vote will be counted fairly, and that ineligible votes or anything else will not be counted, and that when the results come, you can have faith in them. And I think that we can start with making the actual process of voting easier, and in some way clarifying how votes are counted so that people will have faith in the system. I think if we do those things, and many of those things would require just some easy legislation that we already agree on, would at least set the stage for people believing that the system we have now is fair and accurate. And then we can go on and talk about those loftier issues of the electoral college and rank voting and things like that.
So sort of as a follow-up, I mean, do your respective parties and caucuses see absentee voting rather as a problem? I mean, have we gone too far down this path? I mean, if we compare it, for example, to Utah, which has actually, absentee balloting and they've done it for years. But I know that there's some concern that might be open to more fraud. I don't know that there's any evidence of that, but that's a concern that certainly some people have. So are your respective caucuses looking to decrease the ability for people to do absentee balloting, or just to clarify the process? I'm kind of curious about that.
I think it's to clarify the process and make them easier to tabulate, because current law says those envelopes that they're placed in can't be opened until election day, and there's simply not enough time on election day to count the amounts of people who absentee vote, especially in more urban communities.
I agree. I think though there may be some things that we need to clarify that will take legislation. I think the ability to for IDs, that was a problematic thing. I think we still need to go back and make sure that people understand and that we do have forms of identification that everybody can use. We have, as we know, homeless populations that they're always difficult because you have to prove a residence. There are ways that we have to make sure that everybody, no matter what their circumstance, and again, I think that we need to really understand what it is we can do to make the election process one that is fair, secure, and gives access. It gives access to people who would otherwise find it difficult or impossible to vote because of their circumstances.
Sticking with the theme of viewer questions, I'm going to switch gears a little bit on the issue. We received a question from a Rhinelander resident regarding the increasing attention and concern about PFAS, sometimes called forever chemicals. As you know, these are chemicals used in a variety of products ranging from food packaging to stain repellents, coated cookware, firefighting foam, and other kinds of products. Do you envision the legislature working on this issue in the upcoming session? Is it getting a lot of attention in the state capitol?
Well, we already did. We passed a law that says the DNR will have rulemaking authority to have standards for how many, the parts per million or whatever. I'm not going to be the most scientific about this, but here's a little inside baseball. So we had the issue of PFAS, and we did pass a bill, and it was good. It said good standards. But then it went to rulemaking process, meaning the DNR will set up the rules. And then the rules, though, can go through two different committees, JCAR, Joint Administrative Rules. And then there's another one, Joint Committee on the Review of Administrative Rules. And that committee lowered the standards for PFAS the other day. Outcry. I mean, pretty much just weakened the bill so much that it almost has no effect. So in some way, yeah, we passed a bill. The bill is still on the book, but the rules changed it. And that was, I thought that was pretty inappropriate, because you are down to a small group of people that are going to make a decision about PFAS for the entire state. And we shouldn't let that happen. That's not where the authority should have been. The DNR did it, and it was okay, and then then it was reviewed. Now, call me crazy, but I don't think just because the chair of the JCRAR doesn't like this bill that they should have the authority to go and change it like this.
As a former member of that committee, I think that's a JCRER. I think that's a very important committee. And as someone who actually authored a bill to give more legislative oversight over the rulemaking process a couple years ago, which I'm happy we got three years ago, got signed into law. So the rule that the DNR was working on promulgating went above and beyond what was prescribed in the bill. That's simply the facts of that. It's about, I mean, the whole issue is like all water issues. How do we make sure that businesses can still operate and provide clean water without shifting this cost over to public water utilities and things like that to try reach an unattainable standard, for a standard that can't be met or that costs, a small municipality millions and millions of dollars to try reach that standard. So, I mean, that will be the process going forward, and we'll make sure that we can make sure that there's still clean water in the state of Wisconsin like there is.
Mm-hmm. See, this is where this lawmaking is hard. This is hard work. I mean, we set alcohol limits for intoxication, and yes, it is. Some people want it here, some people want it here. That's what lawmaking is. It's saying how many miles per hour, what's the content, and then you got to go deeper. And as Devin said, who's going to be affected and how do we help them? Perhaps some of those businesses just shouldn't be making the stuff they're making or using the stuff they're using. But for a municipal water utility, I agree. Let's put in something in the bill or something in law. I'm going to make this up as I go. So forgive me, where you can apply for a waiver that will give you so many days because you don't have the money to fix your wastewater treatment. How about if we take a serious look at how we help these very, very small wastewater utilities do the work they need to do because they don't have the money. They don't have the ability to get the money to make the upgrades, or in some cases build whole new systems that desperately need them where the water isn't being treated right now. This is hard work and it's fussy and it's going to go back and forth incrementally, but that it's what we have to do. And I think that we're going to go there. We're going to work on that. This isn't done. This means, all right, we're going to have to take another crack at this and figure out what legislation will make sense.
Okay, thank you. Another viewer asked a question, and I don't know exactly who asked this, so I apologize to the viewer. But personally, I would just like to say, as a political science teacher, I would get these types of questions all the time from sort of younger generations, especially. It seems like younger generations are very interested in it, and it goes like this. What about cannabis legislation regarding things like medical marijuana and decriminalization and so forth? Is there some kind of legislation that you think is likely to be introduced? And if it is it likely to be passed this session?
Well, this may be the issue that makes my hair fall out. Fortunately, I have a better
You
hairline.
got a joke, Aaron.
I know,
You
I just had to
got a
throw it
joke,
in there.
Aaron.
Give you credit for that.
Fortunately, I have a better hairline than my father when he was this age. But no, so 2 years ago, I was up for election, and when I'm up for election, I knock on a lot of doors, and frankly, I was surprised at how many people this was their number one issue, or an issue very important to them, voluntarily brought it up when I was talking to them at their doors. I still hear concerns. I represent a high percentage of manufacturing in my district. So I'm hearing from manufacturers that they're very concerned, especially about legalizing recreational marijuana, that they need sober people in their businesses, and there's no easy test right now, like a breath test, if you show up to work drunk. I hear the same concern from law enforcement about opening up Pandora's box with recreational. Medical, it'd have to be really tight, unfortunately, or fortunately, however your feelings are towards the issue. The federal government still has marijuana still illegal.
Mhm.
It's a federal law. I know some people, a lot of states have disregarded federal law and just legalized it on their own. But, I think you have to be cautious when you're just passing laws that are in outright conflict with federal laws.
I too have heard a lot about the use of medical marijuana. So let's just talk about, separate this into two different ways of looking at it. We can talk about it as a drug, and then we can talk about the people who want to use it. And I think that a lot of people are thinking about the people who are in pain and people who are suffering. And I think that the prevailing opinion among society is that people who are suffering should have access. I think that is really a lot of people feel that if you're suffering, if you're in the end stages of cancer, if you've got a chronic disease that you can absolutely say that this is going to help you, most people are going to say, let's be compassionate, and they should have access to it in some way. Then it becomes a controlled substance, and that you get to sell, and then you're going to have to set up a system in taxation and all of that. So I think that the actual implementation of it is going to be where it's problematic. I do appreciate and understand the others who say that, we're not really controlling alcohol as well as we should. Why should we add another one? And that comes into play where, if a manufacturer or someone says, I can't have somebody who's stoned on my floor. Well, you can't have somebody who's drunk on your floor either. And I know the testing, but it's the behavior. If you see that someone's not capable of doing the job, then get out. You should be able to do that. And I know we need to be able to assure them. What people don't want is to see that, I hate to overstate this, but I don't want any deadbeat potheads going out and breaking the law. That's what they don't want. Okay, maybe some people are going to say, well, yeah, those deadbeat potheads have rights, and if it's legal, they should use it. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there, and I don't want to go there yet. Because again, we have to do what our constituents, what our citizen Wisconsin, what can help them, and at the point at which what they're willing to tolerate, what they will accept. And if we give them something, or if we present something that is going to completely legalize it and completely, make it a frightening concept, it's not going to go. It just won't go, because we've got a responsibility to present something that will keep people safe and content and in agreement with the law. When it comes to decriminalizing, now I have a very strong opinion about that. There are too many people, good people. They're not, deadbeat potheads. They are decent people who got caught with a little too much marijuana than they should have. And they're convicted felons, and they're in there for many, many years. It sets them on a trajectory straight down. We don't need to let that incident turn them into, ruin their lives. We need to reform on some of these laws in a way to begin to decriminalize it to the point where if you make a mistake and you're caught with too much dope, you're not gonna end up in prison forever. It's just a compassionate, efficient thing to do. We just don't need to send so many of these minor offenders into prisons.
Thank you. Senator LeMahieu, anything you'd like to add to that or not?
No.
Okay. Well, guys, we're kind of approaching our hour here. Dave, unless there's something a burning question you have, I just want to say to both Senator LeMahieu, Majority Leader LeMahieu, Senator Bewley, Minority Leader Bewley in the Senate, thank you both so much for being a guest on our show today. I mean, I feel like we barely scratched the surface, right? There's so much more that I would love to be able to talk about with you, but we sure appreciate the time that you gave us. And I think we also really appreciate your public service on behalf of the residents of Wisconsin. Now, unfortunately, we had such a full show today that we were unable to hear from our third guest. I don't know if you were aware that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was supposed to be on as well. And I'm sure he would have wanted to contribute some thoughts about Wisconsin's legislative agenda, but I know he'll be ready and waiting for us next week. So apologies to The Rock.
And I do want to express our appreciation to both of you for being on the show today. It's great to see the two of you, and I really appreciated your comments about the ability to work together, where there is that overlap and commonality of interest to get some things done in Madison. So thank you very much for being with us today, and hopefully we can have you back sometime.
It would be a pleasure.
Well, we'll see everyone next week on Two Ball Guys. So stay tuned for a Friday show at noon, and have a good week, everybody.